We met the War Museum team in the summer of 2022 and were impressed by how they transformed their museum work into contemporary art, which in their hands becomes a true weapon. We felt the call to show the world how the brave and talented museum team holds their museum front.
My name is Dmytro. I am the Deputy Director General for Scientific Work at the War Museum and the curator of the 2402 project. This exhibition is the first project about all of us, about what happened to us, to each of us, about the first day of the war. When we started working on it, we thought about what we would talk about and to whom we would tell it. After all, each of us has our own story of that day. We remember the course of the first day by minutes, by hours, but what was happening across the entire country. We created a timeline of events and presented it at the exhibition so that everyone could see how quickly the war spread across Ukraine, and each person could see themselves in these events, what they felt or saw at a particular time on that day. One would recall the beginning of the attack. What of Shashi? What first comes to mind? Enemy defenses. We remember the explosions in Kiev, in other cities. But we asked ourselves the question, how many cities and settlements came under enemy attack in the first hours of the war? It turned out to be more than 60 places in Ukraine. These included cities, towns, military bases and airfields. And when we marked these regions on the map, we saw that the whole of Ukraine came under fire from the first hour of the war. At this exhibition, we talk about the main meanings that emerged or were established on the first day of the war and have held throughout the year, continue to hold and inspire us to fight. At 3:40, the border crossing in the Luhansk region began the capture of checkpoints in Crimea. And at 5 in the morning, a massive missile strike hit the territory of Ukraine. For further half an hour later, martial law was introduced, and at 6, the airspace over our country was closed. At 6:46, President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his people. In total, he made 3 video addresses throughout the day. The first was on a phone camera, a selfie.
Шановні громадяни України, сьогодні вранці президент Путін оголосив проведення спеціальної військової операції на Донбасі.
Робота президента в цей день. The president's work on this day is dozens of calls to leaders to be the main leaders of all countries in the world.
Kiev, in Odessa, and from Belarus. So we fight everywhere on our territory, everywhere through.
9 presidential decrees that were issued on this day. Before you is the decree on the imposition of martial law. These were documents that set life on a wartime footing, and their appearance on the first day of the war was extremely important. 8 o'clock in the morning, an attacks on Konotop, Volnovakha, Mariupol, Shastia. 10 o'clock already, battles on the outskirts of Kharkiv.
And at 12 o'clock, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, informs us about the downing of 6 enemy planes and 2 helicopters. We realized that we have an army capable of resisting such a powerful invasion. We believed in our pilots, idiots who can eliminate enemy aircraft. And from the very first day, the image of the legendary Ghost of Kiev appeared. Today, we cannot name all the surnames as the war continues. We speak of the fallen pilots who became part of this myth of the Ghost of Kiev. These are professional, dedicated specialists, pilots with great experience, who on the first day of the war saved our aviation, saved their comrades, took their machines into the air to allow others to relocate to a safe place.
Alexander Oksanchenko, who defended the capital of Ukraine from the first day of the war and died in battle over Kyiv on February 25th. Stepan Shobanyuk covered aviation from the first day, supporting Ukrainian aviation, and died in battle over the city of Kropivnitsky on February 28th. Petro Mikhailo Matyoshenko, already a military man at an older age, returned from his civilian life to aviation, trained young pilots, and when it was necessary to perform the most difficult tasks, namely the deblockade of Snake Island, he flew out himself. He did not return from that mission.
It was June 26, 2022. 8 вересня
On September 8th, the family received a message from the embassy of Ukraine in Bulgaria that the sea had washed ashore the body of a Ukrainian pilot. The items that were with him, and based on DNA results, it was determined that this was indeed Colonel Matyoshenko's body, and thus his tragic fate was established.
host. The well-known event of the first day is the attack on Hostomel airport. Throughout the day, several attacks were carried out by the enemy and repelled by Ukrainian forces. And when we ask who these military personnel were, we answer they were various units, but the Omega Special Unit soldiers stood out. Their task was to defend the Ukrainian airfield, protect the capital, and fight against sabotage and reconnaissance groups. And before you are photographs of the warriors: Viktor Holovko, Roman Sobkov, Oleg Ram, Vadim Zelenyuk. They all fought on the first day of the war. They all fulfilled their duty, military duty, doing it extremely professionally, organized and skillfully. Here is such a weapon. Before you is the N-Law of Vadim Zelenyuk. With it, he made his last shot and died in battle. And when Boris Johnson visited our museum with the permission of the Zelenyuk family, he left his autograph on a military artifact. This is a testament to our respect, our gratitude to Great Britain, which provided this weapon even before the full-scale invasion began. 15 years was fighting on the outskirts, 16 years was occupation of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exclusion zone, 17 years news that practically everyone remembers. This is a report that a Russian reconnaissance platoon surrendered. Do you remember how we recalled this event? How we were proud of our warriors who are capable of capturing the enemy? This was done by our Ukrainian heroes. And before you is the first collective decree of the President awarding the title of Hero of Ukraine to Ukrainian soldiers. Decree from the 2nd of March 2022. In this decree, those who participated in the battles from the first day of the full-scale invasion. In particular, Dmytro Chornyi, a young man who confronted the enemy at the Antonivsky Bridge, was mentioned. On the first day of the war, he was seriously wounded, managed to be taken to a hospital in Kherson, operated on, and the city was occupied. While still on the hospital bed, he learned that he had been awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine. It was a double danger because Russian soldiers were also in the hospital. They were saving him. First, military doctors and nurses saved him. Then an ordinary Ukrainian family saved him by simply hiding him in their home. Then Dmytro was taken across the front line by Ukrainian counterintelligence, and he received his award, the Gold Star of the Hero of Ukraine, from the hands of the president, from the hands of Valery Zaluzhny. In front of you is the tunic he wore at this honorary ceremony, at this honorary award.
Там така історія просто.
There's just an incredible story there. This guy,
She impresses me a lot too. He was a hero of Ukraine. I can tell you more interestingly on camera than off camera. He is a hero of Ukraine. So he says, I'm lying in the hospital. A nurse comes to me and secretly says, I'm lying like an ulcer patient. They said there that it's an ulcer patient. And he seems to have it there. He was operated on a long time ago, lying down, unable to get up. The documents were hidden in a safe under lock and key so that no one would know who he was. And he says, a nurse secretly shows on her phone, look, she says, here is the decree, you are a hero of Ukraine posthumously. He says, how am I alive? Well, he says, like this, let's get him. It's very dangerous to be here. He was taken away. The family, the husband and wife went to work. They had 2 children. The children were at school. He says, and the neighbor, some kind of Russist, he says, always playing these Russian songs. I can't stand it. For me, it was such a trial. Another main event of the first day of the full-scale invasion was the battles for Snake Island. Throughout the day, we heard 3 reports about attacks by Russian ships on this island. We all heard the words spoken by the Ukrainian border guard in response to the offer to surrender. These words also inspired us all. We are exhibiting stamps, the famous stamps with these words. We are also exhibiting a letter stating that the use of these words cannot harm the reputation of state and local government bodies.
Who said these words? It is still unknown.
In front of you in the photo is a postcard about the search for Roman Hribov, who was considered missing. His photograph, it turned out that he was captured. When he was released, it was reported that he was the one who said those words. Later, we were informed that this was done intentionally to protect the real author of these words, who is in captivity. Until now, we do not know who said these words, but now it does not matter. These words have entered. They supported us from the first day, mobilized us, and now the whole world knows them.
Русський воєнний корабль пішов бити нахуй. Вся моя країна велика, рідна сім'я тут. Вас ніколи нікому не було потрібно робити таке, що від того світу видно.
On the first day of the war, we went to sleep with this message. At 10 p.m., we were informed that 13 border guards from Snake Island had died and the island was captured by Russian troops.
На нашому острові Зміїний, захищаючи його до останнього, всі хлопці, прикордонники, геройські, загинули.
На наступний день, the next day, military chaplains of various denominations, including Vasil Virazov, set out on the boat Sapphire to Snake Island to lay the Ukrainian border guards to rest or evacuate their bodies. They never got to set foot on Zmini Island, as their boat was surrounded by Russian ships and was captured. Vasil Virazov spoke about the terrible ordeals he had to endure, and only on the 6th of May, during an exchange, he was released and returned to a changed Ukraine. Vasil handed over this icon, the icon of the Mother of God, quick to hear Kysh, which was with him during captivity. Dubayaka Sosu was supposed one icon for all the chaplains, and they all prayed to it, which greatly puzzled the Russian soldiers, who asked, how can you of different denominations pray to one icon? To which they replied, so the Lord is one. When Vasil was returning, he took it with him as a kind of talisman and handed it over to our museum.
Cities like Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel came under attack from the first day of the full-scale invasion. These cities were heavily bombarded, civilian homes were damaged, people's fences were damaged, and in front of you is a fence from Irpin. Near this fence, territorial defense fighter Ihor Korotkik was killed. And when Irpin was liberated, the children of Irpin painted this fence with their drawings. Next to this photograph of Bucha is Vokzalna Street, where a column of enemy equipment was stopped. This fence is a symbol of hope, hope for revival, for the return of life. All cities ravaged by Russian troops, for the revival of all Ukraine. The next part of the exhibition is a story about the main meanings for civilians in civilian life, which were established from the beginning of the full-scale invasion and continue to operate now. In particular, this includes the formation of territorial defense, February 24th. Alexei Reznikov, the Minister of Defense, addressed through his Facebook with an announcement to volunteer and enlist in the ranks of the territorial defense and take up arms to defend their homes.
Дорогі українці, план ворога зламати нас не спрацював. Україна б'ється і б'ється успішно. Зараз ми мобілізуємо міжнародну підтримку. Я закликаю усіх, хто готовий тримати зброю, вступати до лав сил територіальної оборони.
The best of the nation joined the territorial defense. Both teachers, professors, as well as workers and employees joined. In the display, you see Ivan Petrilyak, the Dean of the History Faculty of Kyiv National University, and his student Oleg Filipov. You see a report that Mr. Dean, along with Kobzar Taras Panichenko and Chaplain Maxim Strykarch, are requesting leave to conduct a lecture, an educational lecture at a military unit. They are all servicemen of the territorial defense.
And these documents once again confirms the G-nations based are fighting in the ranks of these forces.
To understand what Ukrainians were thinking from the first hours of the invasion, what they were doing in the first hours, how they were saving themselves, we made a random selection of messages from social networks like Facebook, Twitter. First of all, we read about the evacuation, when well-known, familiar, and just unknown people helped each other evacuate families from territories that were being captured right before their eyes by Russian troops. This is the story of Alexander Shchihol. He is from Kyiv. On the first day of the war, he gathered his family and took them to Ternopil. And as he was approaching Ternopil, he received a message from his friends in Irpin that they were in danger and needed help. Leaving his family in Ternopil, he returns to Irpin to evacuate his acquaintances and encounters a Russian checkpoint. There he was robbed, his car was shot at, he was injured, and in the shot-up car he barely managed to reach the nearest hospital. He lost consciousness, but they managed to help him. Meanwhile, his family, having lost contact with him, started searching through social media, and our team participated in this, and the incredible happened. Doctors saw messages on social media about the search for this person. They saw this photo and recognized their unconscious patient who, after surgery, is in the intensive care unit. They informed the family, and that's how the family found Alexander and brought him home. He managed to leave and was in Kyiv, and later the family donated his bullet-riddled sweater to the museum. Also very frightening, Yixing exhibits are arriving at the museum. In the photo before you is Yuri Chabak, a police officer from the city of Bucha. His task was to organize the evacuation of the civilian population. When Bucha was occupied, information about him disappeared and he stopped making contact. Only after Bucha was liberated in this huge mass grave was this police badge that she found on the body of the deceased, which identified Yuri. He fulfilled his duty to the end, helping to organize the evacuation, for which he was killed by a sniper's bullet. Also here are materials of Yulia Payevska, whom we all know as Tyra, a paramedic volunteer. She was evacuating residents of Mariupol, and in this evacuation bus she was taken captive and spent 3 months in captivity, released as a result of an exchange. When we read messages from social networks on the first day of the war, we also encountered many messages about people realizing that a new attack, a new war, were asking themselves the question, and who was the last to feel what war is like? Who was the last to fight against Moscow? And they provided answers. These were our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. Among the materials presented are leaflets of the Ukrainian insurgent army. And if we do not see the year and read these leaflets, they will seem very relevant to us now, very modern. The same calls for struggle against Moscow's imperial ambitions towards Ukraine. And next to it, you see in the photo Lyubov Pohonyuk. At 15 years old, she was a liaison for the Ukrainian insurgent army, was arrested, served time in the Gulag, and then spent 25 years in special settlement in Magadan. With her first earned money, she made herself this green dress. All her life, she kept it as a relic in her home. And when the full-scale invasion began, she handed it to the volunteers with a note in which she wrote, "I am a liaison of the Ukrainian insurgent army with the nickname Sad. I want to give this dress so that you can use it for camouflage nettles to help us save Ukrainian soldiers in this way." Of course, the volunteers understanding the historical significance of this artifact transferred it to the museum, and Miss Lyubov supported the Ukrainian military as much as she could at her very advanced age. She only lived a few days short of the opening of our exhibition and entered life in February 2023. Also featured in the photo is Olena Luhova. She is a witness to the tragedy at Babin Yar. She was a teenager when she saw and heard the shootings of Jews in this ravine with her own eyes. When the full-scale invasion began, the family decided not to inform her, understanding that she was in such a difficult physical condition, and they hid this information from her for over 30 days. And when finally Mrs. Olena realized that something was happening in the country and was informed about the full-scale invasion, she asked her family to give her a rifle and photograph her with it. She sang Ukrainian marches, Cossack marches, and said in her interview that if she had the strength, she would join the army to defend her homeland, because it is the only way for Ukraine to survive. Ms. Olena Luhova, a historian, researched the history of Ukraine all her life and knew well what she was talking about. She also passed away this year. Another key important message from the first day of the war is the unification of Ukrainians in volunteer movements. This is a huge event that distinguishes Ukraine from many other countries, as volunteering is extremely developed, usually an extremely widespread phenomenon starting from the year 2014. And before you is the Kitchen Army of Kiev. You see the jacket of one of the chefs of the Kiev Defense Kitchen, which, having united together, they prepared hundreds of portions of food daily and delivered this food to evacuation points, our military territorial defense police, as well as refugees who found shelter in Kiev. Also before you are the materials of Valeria Yizhova, an 11-year-old girl world champion in checkers, and she found her interesting method of collecting donations for the armed forces of Ukraine. She asked those who lost to her in games to donate. The girl raised about 70,000 hryvnias to help the army. Before you are also the materials of Lesia Panchenko, a former museum employee who also sent her son to the front and started helping launching a volunteer movement. And these candles, these socks, these amulets made by the participants of her volunteer organization are constantly being sent to the front line. The next part of the exhibition is the most painful topic. It's a story about those who went to sleep on February 21st in their country, in their home, in their bed, and woke up already in occupation. These are people who were they fell under occupation on the first day of the war, were unable to evacuate, and are still on temporarily occupied territory.
Вроде так спокойно, заехала колонна, погнали вот дальше, вниз, кто знает Бердянск, вот, проспект Пролетарский.
Что проблема, не автомат, я без оружия, без ничего, я стою перед тобой.
Hannah Chonas, in front of you are leaflets from the resistance movement, yellow ribbon from Kherson. Even under occupation, people continue to fight. In front of you is the family of Hennady Holoboda, a man with his sons. Together with his wife, he ended up in occupation in the village of Novoplatonivka in the Kharkiv region. And over time, he realized that there was a liquidation of pro-Ukrainian families. He saw how his acquaintances, how his like-minded people, one by one, simply disappeared from the occupied territories. And he decided to save himself. Together with his wife, they left, crossed the front line at Chornyi, and reached Ukrainian territory. And then when their village was liberated and the Lviv territorial defense settled in their homestead, they finally reported that in their yard, hoping to return to their native home, they buried the Ukrainian flag right in a jar in the garden and planted dill on top. This flag was unearthed by the Lviv territorial defense. Here it is before you. She left these inscriptions and handed them over to the museum. Mr. Hennedy also handed over his diary to the museum. It looks strange. It's numbers, calculations. After all, he recorded daily the number of dead Russian soldiers, Russian equipment, heavy equipment, airplanes. A detailed count was conducted of the enemy's losses, thereby bringing victory closer, bringing closer the time when the entire territory of Ukraine will return under the blue and yellow flag, when we achieve victory and this war finally ends. And this flag in our exhibition is our hopes, our expectations, our aspiration, our struggle for the entire territory of Ukraine to return under the blue and yellow banner, for Ukraine to achieve its greatest victory, defend its independence, rebuild, revive, and finally begin development in its peaceful future. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.
зовсім не соромно дивитися на небо крізь сльози, коли місто в полум'ї, тікати чи не варто, залишимось фантомами, але на своїй рідній землі не відчуваємо